I do want this to be as interactive as possible. Anyone who makes Sims sort of hates the presentation thing, and I'm certainly one of them. So let me ask you one question, and again, please type in your response. Do you believe you can learn leadership in a significant way through a lecture?
Can I answer straight away too and
Absolutely.
participate?
Absolutely.
Well, I do not believe you can do that in a lecture. I think that's the key word in your question, the lecture.
Absolutely. Of course, you can learn leadership. I believe you can, or you can get a lot better at it. But can you learn it through this sort of Zoom kind of presentation? Can you learn it through a PowerPoint presentation? Okay. Thank you, everyone. Lots of no's there. Um, Theoretical, yes, Amy, great point. You can learn some of the underlying theory, so there is some value to be had from it, but only a little bit. So great responses. And again, there wasn't necessarily a right or wrong answer. I do believe that there's that there are some people who are quite good at communicating, but it's very, very tough. Okay, just give you a quick little story. So once upon a time, there was a little boy, and this little boy traveled all over the world, went to all different kinds of places, and went to some beautiful places like Russia and some other wonderful countries, and some very successful countries, and also some very poor countries, and some very countries that were really in need of some work in progress. And through this person's travels, spoiler alert that this is me, I really learned that education was the most important thing ever. That really education was the thing that if you did not have it, you were in a lot of trouble, and if you did have it, the world was open to you. So I really had this incredible good belief in education being this absolute milestone. And I also went to some superb schools. I went to some of the best boys' schools in Concord. I went to Brown. I went to some superb, Ivy League universities. And throughout my mumble number of years, 20 years of whatever, I really had a fundamental question, which is why is education so bad? We know how important it is. We know how transformational it is. We spend a huge amount of money in education, but by and large, and again, having gone to some of the best schools, and having gone to some of the best corporations and training centers and the best corporations, most of it, if not all of it, is really, really bad. And that's sort of my starting point here. Um, but I also went to some of the best summer camps in the world, some of the most award-winning summer camps in the world, and they had a very different approach to education. This one, Camp Chwonki, where I spent many years, was run by a person who used to be the headmaster of a prep school in the New England area and left the prep school because he couldn't stand the education model there ever, and he believed he could do a better job in a boys' camp than he ever could in a prep school. And I think he was right. And his belief in education was that it was incredibly experiential, that you only learned when you did stuff. You had to get your hands dirty. You might have some contests and have sort of fun with competitions, but also you had to really get into it. If you weren't doing something, you weren't learning. You couldn't learn from a book. You couldn't learn from a lecture other than, as we say, a bit of theory. Yes, someone else there said I had that picture with a gargoyle. Yes, back in the day when we could actually visit the gargoyle before Notre Dame quarantined it off. So I also grew up playing computer games. I think like most people here did. And in my opinion, the pedagogy of the best computer games is infinitely better than the pedagogy of the best schools. And if any of you recognize this one in the upper left, this game in the upper left, any takers here? What's this game?
Does anyone recognize it? We do have a little delay between our Zoom and the streaming, so we might give it extra 30 seconds for people to process that and type in the answer.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Amy. Yes, it's Portal. And this one, you're way ahead of me, UBW. This is Half-Life 2. And in my opinion, even having played far too many computer games since then, probably Portal 2 and Half-Life 2 represent the apex of instructional design in computer games. If you want to just see how a game can masterfully expose you to content and slowly grow your skill cone, slowly get you better and better at doing something until finally you can improv, you can combine it with other skills. So in my opinion, Portal 2 and Half-Life 2 are still the absolute best instructional design games out there if you want to just really study superb. Again, much better than what I saw at Harvard, much better than what I saw at Brown, much better than what I saw at Wharton. So I spent many, many years, again, far too many years than I should, going around the country and going around the world, and doing research on how people learn. And I wrote a ton of books, everything from Simulation the Future of Learning to Learning by Doing, Simulation Serious Games. Aha, you can probably sense a theme here. To Short Sims, my newest book. I also wrote Unschooling Rules, which was a massive critique, a sweeping critique of our traditional educational model. And I think Obama quoted it once, which is sort of fun, and a bunch of people put it on their best of lists, which is also kind of fun. But by far my most read book, which is certainly my biggest outlier. But again, I developed educational simulations, got a patent or two, did some bunch of interviews, worked with the military closely. I founded Gartner's e-learning coverage. So again, just bounce around trying to figure out how we can move the ball forward. And I did a lot of cool educational simulations, but most of them were too complicated. And complicated stuff is a real problem in education because instructors hate to deploy it if they don't really understand it. If the technology is too complicated, then it breaks very quickly. And so I was working really hard to try to figure out an approach to education that had all the good of workbooks and all the good of lectures, which was scalability, easy to edit, easy to get into, but also all the advantages of experiential learning, or at least a lot of advantages of how do you get people learning in a specific context. So that was sort of has been my goal for the last 15 years anyway. And again, I'm thrilled with Short Sims to sort of finally, again, a la about 4 or 5 years ago, finally succeeded in a model of education that has the good of educational simulations, or at least a lot of the good, and also sort of the easiness, the affordability, and the affordances of workbook style content. And so as I work with clients, they are doing with Short Sims what I really wanted education to do, which was to evolve from from focusing on facts. So most traditional content focuses on facts, dates and definitions, basic writing, basic analysis. So this is all the stuff here where most of our traditional educational methodologies are really good at doing. I wanted to pull us around here so we can start teaching things like project management, certification skills, security. We heard this last presentation. Stewardship. How do you teach stewardship? How do you teach management of yourself and others? Most important skill. How do you teach leadership of yourself and others? Most important skill. And so, again, trying to give organizations the tools to shift from this stuff, which it's great, it's wonderful, but it's not that useful, to the stuff right now that organizations are really craving for. And so again, you see here, the gray is sort of where traditional education is very, very strong and competent. Green here is where I have seen clients develop Short Sims and develop multiple Short Sims to meet sort of skills along this line. So, leadership, honestly, it's very, very good at developing competence and conviction. You're not going to learn super fluency from a simulation, but you're going to get at least sort of halfway there to competence and conviction levels. Any questions here before we dig into the how? People coming back saying, I leave for 10 seconds and the air went dead. What happened? Just waiting for a question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So as questions come in, please type them in real time. So the best way of learning is by doing, and maybe the only way of learning is by doing. That's a pretty big statement. And how do we do that? Well, we have to present situations that mimic their real world counterparts and how they appear and how they respond, abstracted for the goal of developing targeted competencies and convictions, cost effectively, and developed with clients as much as for clients. So, really important there at the end, cost effectively. If we can't do cost effectively, then we're dead in the water. Then we simply can't move ahead at all. So cost effectively, really, really important part of it. So this is sort of this new notion of, let's call it skeuomorphic instructional design. How do we create content that models the world at some level? So the reason to care about this stuff, before I go any further, I should probably say this up front. Short Sims will help you grow your instructional design service. If you're internal to an organization, if you are an external vendor selling to a client organization, Short Sims will help you grow your instructional design service. It will give you more options to sell and deliver very high value content to it. So Kate asked a great question. Maybe I missed this, but for people with an education, without an educational teaching background, can you define short sims? I can do better than that, I hope, just I can show you some. But they're basically, I'll define them this way. Short sims are ways of presenting situations that mimic the real world counterparts, albeit highly abstracted, for the goal of developing targeted competencies cost effectively and develop with clients. So I will say that is sort of my working definition. But again, I mean, in this industry, definitions are useless. You have to see stuff. And so most importantly, both here in this presentation and then out on your own, I strongly recommend you go out and play them for yourself, because that's where you really get a feel for them.
Because that's how you learn, by doing.
Did you learn by doing? And then, because words are so cheap and easy, I can say anything with words, but I hate words. The last step in the short sim design process is like get rid of words. Words are great for helping us along the way, but once you rely on words, you're absolutely doomed. Thank you, Eric. I do appreciate that. Yeah, the best way to learn is by doing, and again, maybe the only way of learning is by doing. So let me ask you this. Here's another sort of theoretical question. If you were in charge of a training group, which is better long term? Which is a better place to start long term? Which is having a great mission and budget, with only the ability to produce mediocre content, or a mediocre mission and budget, both the ability to create great content? And by the way, there really is no right answer here. This is not a leading question, but that is sort of an interesting way of thinking about it. Would you rather be if you're going to start off a training group, which is a better place to start? A great mission and budget, but only the ability to produce mediocre content, or mediocre mission budget with the ability to create great content?
That's interesting. We're starting getting the answers. Just to me, this is a great question because it demonstrates the real life situation again, because you can almost never have it all. And you ultimately have, in most cases, you do have to make your choice.
By the way, A is a totally, part of me wants to have more A's. Don't get me wrong. So I think A is a really good answer. But
I'm also an A person, by the way.
I'm sorry?
I'm also an A person here, by the way.
It's great to have a great mission and budget, and I love it. But I've seen a lot of organizations that have had great missions and budgets, and only producing mediocre content, and it goes south fast. It goes pear-shaped fast, because you say, hey, we really want you to help with the mission of the organization. We really need you to do this incredible cultural transformation. We need you to be on the tip of leadership. But if you're only doing it through lectures and you're only doing it through PowerPoint and workbook slides, then a lot of the wind goes out of your sail really, really quickly, and it gets very demoralizing fast. And then you sit a year later saying, kind of, what happened? How did I lose the ear of the CEO? How did I lose my place at the big table? Because the content wasn't as good as I knew it needed to be. So again, it's a sort of a fun theoretical. Again, there are many mornings I get up and wish I had the A's. But I know long term, it's going to be the B's that I think are a better path to sort of sustainable growth than the A's, even though both are wonderful answers. And Amy said it well. I only want to create great content, and I think that is sort of almost what it comes down to is if I go to bed at night and I created great content, I'm pretty happy. And if I go to bed at night and I did some deliverable that wasn't great, it's pretty discouraging in this industry. So yeah, Amy, great point. Another theoretical question: if you have 20 minutes, which is a better use of learners' time, to be told about a list of techniques, or to practice one technique in a variety of situations? And a lot of certification training goes down this path where we want to cover everything. Lawyers love A, by the way. So if you're a lawyer in the audience, you're going to say, hey, A by all means, A. But if you're going to be learning it yourself, especially, then practicing techniques in a variety of situations becomes sort of a much more dramatic. So yeah, there's a couple of theoreticals just to get us thinking about content. So here's we do. One second here. I'm going to go over to show you a short sim very quickly.
Sure. While Clark is opening his presentation, it also feels that could very possibly be that people who are mostly on the academic side and do not really like to touch upon practice would also be going for A, because they do feel it's their stronger side, while the practitioners will most always choose B, because this is where they believe the truth comes from, right?
And the reality about academics, and it's a great point, Chris, and I certainly agree with you. A lot of academics are still about practice, but what you're practicing is being in a classroom. What you're practicing is cramming for a test.
Mhm.
So what you end up learning, almost no matter what the content is, are the skills that you practice, not not the information that you presented. So, when I got out of school, I was really, really good at sitting in lectures that I didn't care about taking notes. I was really, really good at, you know, writing term papers at 3 in the morning. I was really good at, all those kinds of things, asking questions that made me look like I was smarter than perhaps I really was. And so, we still, even in an academic situation, we are what we practice. Okay, so we can switch back. Um, Chris, thank you very much. Okay, so
Yes.
here's a couple of beats of a short sim just to give you practice. Actually, I'll show you. This is what it looks like behind the scenes here. So this is Talkmaster, which is awesome. It's just, if it is the tool it is the tool in the iSpring toolkit that you should be using most of all. So here's a quick example of a sim. Here's one on deliberate practice. This is a discipline called deliberate practice. Welcome to Short Sims, understanding discipline, deliberate practice. You'll experience it at its most rigorous, but you can do it however you want. Okay, in this short sim, you are a manager in a large organization. A year ago, you joined a local debating club in your spare time and are enjoying it. So there's a graphic, there's a bit of a setup. Your favorite online game is a debating app where you select the best arguments. While frustrating at first, introducing a little bit of a model here. Now doing analysis is, and arguing is completely relaxing for you. So, hey, you love arguing, you're a good debater. And you can rewind it and say, show me that beat again. Okay, great. So that's fine. And now we're going to go through the process. And so through your debating experience analysis game, you now have some ability in debating skills. And for this sim, which would you like to do? Become truly great at debating, or keep debating as a fun way to relax? The first choice in deliberate practice is wanting to be great at something. If you don't want to be great at it, this is not going to be a thing for you. So this is a real choice. And maybe, heck, I just want to have fun with debating. And so you spend your life as a mediocre debater, and fair enough. And that's either, okay, there, I'm done with my sim, or you know what, I want to make a different choice. Okay, so become truly great at debating. Okay, so you want to become truly great at debating, but over time, you never get any better. So time goes by and you're kind of stuck in a rut. And we've all had that situation. We're doing something and we get stuck in a rut. So to become great, what do? Do you want to spend more time debating, and do you want to spend more time in the flow, or do you want to work on techniques? And so again, in this situation, the right answer is, I want to work on techniques. And so when you're getting better at something, here's a question. So in this case, you want to gain some insights from some of the great debaters over the last few decades. What do you look at? Do you look at great debaters delivering their greatest performances? Do you look at great debaters delivering their good and bad performances, or how they prepare? And the truth in this case, it's, to get better at something, whether you're an athlete or whether you're a politician or a CEO, and you have a role model, you really want to see how people prepare. So all the joy in life, all the skill in life is how people prepare. In this case, you realize that you're very good at analysis, but you're really, really bad at connecting with people. So you can look at your own skill set and, okay, I'm really good at analysis. I'm really bad at connecting with people. So what do? Do you work on where you're strong, and do you work on where you're weak? This question, by the way, is Socratic. This is a Socratic question. If you look at it this way, the answer is obvious. Of course, I don't want to practice where I'm strong. Of course, I want to practice where I'm weak. But most people practice where they're strong. So again, we're making people make a lot of decisions. And again, a lot of times, this is not going to be a hard sim for people. This is not, the goal is not to trick people. The goal is not to, whatever. It's just to say, let's think through the process of it, and now let's do it. And now then the rest of the sim is going to be you going through the process of deciding you want to work on your engagement skills, and how do you do it, and how do you measure it, and how do you make progress. So again, the whole sim is about, again, kind of looks like this. It's that long. It's not longer than that. It's a pretty finite skill. And in doing that, you learn here. Thank you, Chris. So you learn about the process of deliberate practice. And so again, short sims could be on anything. Short sims could be on certification skills. They can be on new employee training for a new job, moving documents around. It can be around leadership skills. How do you micromanage, or when do you not micromanage? When do you delegate authority versus when do you delegate process or whatever? So it can be about anything. But I'll take you through the process of how to do it. So it's about a 40-hour process, and this is an abbreviated version of that. This is sort of for the first short sim you make. So for the first short sim you make, pick a topic. It's going to take you about half an hour to think of a topic that interests you. Interview a subject matter expert, and then review the recordings that you make. So it's about a 1-hour process of interviewing your SME, and reviewing the recordings about 3 hours. I spend a lot of time. One of the most important things to do is to review the SME recordings. So let me ask you this question. Again, a little philosophical, but what's a better thing to learn? The right way of doing something, or most of the common mistakes that people make when going through the process? In your opinion, and again, I know the answer is both, but if you had to emphasize one or the other in the context of a short sim, or the context of any learning, which would you focus on? The right way of doing something, or allowing people to experience all the common mistakes?
What's your
Gracie
preference,
B.
Clark?
I'm sorry.
What's your preference, Clark?
Um, the right way of doing something is really frustrating, and I find a lot of training people
Mm.
focus on the one brittle path of
Mm.
success. And I think until you understand all the mistakes that people can make and do make, you really don't understand the topic. So you can say, most of the time in any kind of training situation, the training person goes, "Well, just follow the directions, and you'll do it." And it's a lot more interesting and a lot more empathetic to say, well, where do people make mistakes? And to me, that's just a really fascinating question.
Mm.
And so when interviewing my subject matter expert, my number one question is, what's the right way of doing this? But my number
Mhm.
two question, which I spend a lot more time on, is where do people screw this up? Because the reason we're teaching this is because people screw it up. Where
Because
do people screw up deliberate practice? They screw up by, they don't focus on it. They always want to be in the flow. They think that just by rehearsing something, they get better at it. And, when looking at experts, they focus on their greatest performances, not the
Mm.
nitty gritty, but whatever. So it's the really fun stuff is all the common mistakes.
Mm.
And that's where, again, as you're dedicating your time to a subject matter expert review. So at the end of your subject matter expert review, you have a pile of notes, and you have a lot of the right ways of doing things, and you have a lot of the wrong ways of doing things, or a lot of common mistakes. And so that is, after your SME interview and the note taking that you do from that, you have this sort of big old pile of notes, which is great. The bigger the pile, the better. And then for a short sim, the first thing you start doing is saying, well, I'm going to put them in chronological order. So obviously, or at least for me, whenever I talk to the SME, things are all over the place. We'll talk about the end of the process, the beginning of the process, the middle of the process. So one step is to put them in chronological order from beginning to end, which is what this part step is. And then you start identifying the setting, and then you start saying, okay, well, for say deliberate practice, what's a setting that I'm going to use that I'm going to put all this content in? So a really important part of the sim design process is coming up with a good setting. It's got to be generic enough. It's got to be, generic enough to reach a lot of people, but it also has to be specific enough to be highly relevant. So one thing I use for like corporate people a lot, in this case, I was just doing a sim on cybersecurity. I'm sorry, on evaluating apps. So there was a sim that was being worked on where we wanted to evaluate apps to see if they were future proof or not, if they were worth investing in. And in the sim, I had a bunch of different, it was a whole corporation, but I said to the beginning of the sim was, you work in this corporation, and for 1 week you've been pulled out of your job to be part of a review board to review applications. So now everyone is in the same setting. So once you kind of come up with a setting for your sim, something that ties all of your ideas together. And again, in the deliberate practice one, I chose debating and wanting to get better at debating. That was our sort of a random decision. It could have been you want to get better at sports, or you want to get better at any kind of skill. But I chose debating because it was kind of universal enough as was kind of interesting. So then what you do is start identifying levels and story beats. And so this starts saying, how can I break up this big topic into bite-sized morsels? And so I showed you the Hawk Master screen with sort of everything looking kind of like this, where say, what's level one, what's level two? So if this was say a customer service sim, Level one might be customer one who has got a problem with a lawsuit case, and level two might be a problem with a customer who has missed her flight, and number three might be you know, whatever, an inspection and having to open up the doors, let someone inspect the terminal. I don't know, whatever. But so it's always a matter of how do we break up this giant topic. And so again, in the deliberate practice, it might be level one is deciding, or level one is deciding you want to be good. Level two is doing research on how to be good. And then level three is actually going out in the real world and doing the right process to get better. So this kind of level design is really important. It's really important for a design perspective because levels are sane. And one of my biggest goals in short sim design is to keep people from going crazy, because if you go too far, you can go crazy. So keeping rigorous levels that are that are some degree interchangeable or at least chronological is a really nice way of staying sane in the process. Then you create your storyboard with placeholder branches of graphics. So I use a lot of words at this point. So again, if you use TalkMaster, you grab your characters, you go in, you find backgrounds. I do a lot of custom graphics because I'm that way, and I use PowerPoint and I use vector editing in PowerPoint to do that. But this is sort of what it looks like, what the process looks like. So now at this point, you have your TalkMaster screen, and I do all this work directly on TalkMaster. You start blocking it out. You have right ways of doing things. Every time there's a common mistake, you present that to them and give them an option of making that mistake or not. Give them feedback for why the common mistake is mistake. I don't like multiple parallel paths, so I give people the option of going, once they made a mistake, present quick feedback in terms of why it's a mistake, and then allow them to get back on their path as soon as possible. Um, and then, so that's about an hour and a half to sort of add all the feedbacks for wrong decisions. And then you start working the interface. And one thing, this is a really kind of subtle topic, and I go into this in more detail in the workshop, but oftentimes when you look at a sim at this level, once you've made this kind of blocking out, you start looking for patterns. Are there patterns in the kinds of decisions people are making? So there was one client was doing a call center sim, and a pattern for all of the decisions was something along the lines of every single time, do you solve the problem, do you reject the problem, do you ask for more information, or do you escalate it to your boss, kind of thing. And so that kind of basic pattern came out in almost every decision. So you start looking for patterns in the content. Again, it's a subtle point, but in a perfect sim, a lot of the decisions sort of are the same decisions, but as the sim itself changes. So for a leadership sim, sorry, I apologize. Let me be a little more specific. So in a leadership sim, any single time you engage an employee, you have three options. You can either micromanage that employee, you can delegate process, you can sort of say, here's the way of doing this, go do it, or you can delegate authority, which is solve the problem any way you want. So those are the three options you have as a leader. And the entire sim was 5 or 6 situations, or probably about 10 situations, where you're making the same decision each time. Do you micromanage, do you delegate process, or do you delegate authority? But each time the answer is different because the situation is different. And of course, you can learn more about the situation. So finding the commonality is actually a very subtle skill, but that's often what makes the difference between a good sim and a bad. Then at this point, you start adding like the introductions. So, at the beginning of the sim, you want to, what are you doing and why? The best introductions can be summed up in one sentence. You are a new manager and you need to, improve the quality of the widgets that you're producing, or you're a new employee and you have to make 3 customers happy or something. So to give people a little bit of a challenge, and then start, as you're blocking the sim out, what does success look like at the end of level? The customer is happy, or the widget was produced on time, or the person made the flight, or whatever. And then also kind of work out your introduction. So at this point, we're getting a little more complicated. It still really isn't that complicated, but this is sort of what it looks like. And so, here's an example of a sim intro. Welcome to the sim designed for practicing leadership. In this sim, you are a manager. You have a team of analysts who write influential research articles on public policy, and your goal is to get your team to produce high quality reports. Let's see how well you do. So again, incredibly simple. You rip right through it. It's very zippy. It's very fast. Going backwards there. but it gets you right in there. It gets you clicking. It gets you, again, I like using sort of light cartoony graphics that are sort of, that don't take a lot of thought to process, and off you go. Now we start adding, and again, I've shown you some sort of examples of graphics, but now we start adding some graphics. So again, ask a question, Car, there, is it appropriate to ask how to create short sims outside of iSpring Suite? Would PowerPoint work? PowerPoint is a great visualization tool, to be sure, but I can guarantee you, even if you could squeeze that functionality out of PowerPoint, which I don't really think you can, but even if you could try, I guarantee you're not going to finish the sim. You really do want a tool like Talkmaster to help you out, to hold your hand, to do a lot of the nitty gritty stuff that you really don't want to be doing in PowerPoint. So, I think generically, and the good news is that it is a generic process for creating generic content that is platform independent. Realistically, I make my living off creating short sims, and I spend 90% of my time in Talkmaster, or more. So, it is a you really do want a good tool to help you along, or you can do it in theory, but I bet you're not going to do it in practice. Yes, thanks. Good, Kathy. More pick there. Good. So starting adding graphics and props. And so every sim, has a different flavor. Again, I make all my graphics myself in PowerPoint. I use PowerPoint because I'm comfortable in it, but I tend to do vector-based graphics in PowerPoint. And it can be everything from super, photorealistic documents for that kind of client, to more abstracty things, to cartoony, to isometric or whatever. And this is all clip art based, isometric as well. And it's you can spend a long time sort of thinking about graphics, but graphics are really important. And the nice thing about iSpring is it both gives you a consistent format to use, while also giving you the freedom to create whatever graphics you want, if you want to go down that path. So, you start thinking like an animator. You start thinking about, okay, here's one on virtual work and managing virtual employees. And I'm going to have three metrics I'm worried about. I'm worrying about exposure. How exposed is the person to the organization? So we don't want that person lost. How productive is that person? And what's their work-life balance like? And making sure they're balanced. And so, I'm going to make a bunch of decisions, but every decision I'm going to make is going to be against sort of this metric. So here's one employee, here's sort of the rest of the employees there. But you start thinking of like animators, and this is all very easy to, you build out your graphics to be easy to modify. And even when you're making sort of photorealistic graphics, again, you can do amazing stuff in PowerPoint, and use Google and search them for documents. You can make your own highly customizable documents that you can then interact with and turn them over. You can press turn over, and then the next screen can show turned over, and you can say shrink, zoom in, or zoom out, or something. So you can you can use the interface to engage, graphics, and you can use PowerPoint to make as complicated graphics as you want. I guess one more example, because stuff is sort of fun. Here's a government employee, and it's like, okay, we gotta mock up a government employee, and we had to do it for about 50 different clients, so it's sort of worth it to create a template to this is my made up government organization, FRA, with their made up logo. So again, PowerPoint, if you're comfortable with it, gives you an incredible tool to do almost any kind of graphic you want, from sort of cartoony and especially if you pull some clip art too. And if you are using clip art, I'd use vector-based clip art, so you can change the colors and stuff. Then you have your success conclusion beats. Good job. Hey, you did it. You understand that timely intervention is critical. In this meeting, you should, whatever. And so the nice thing about it is, by the time someone is done with the sim, you can give them a review of the important lessons, but you do it in the context of good job. You did this. Look at everything you did. You're amazing. You did A, you did B, you did C. So by the time you get to the end of the sim, you really feel like, hey, I've earned that content. I understand the content. I know the context it's in. And doing there. And so add graphics. Then one more step, which is I call head fakes or scaffolding. So now you can sort of put in your graphics here. If you have graphics and charts, you can put in your people and different emotional states and things, all your common mistakes, all your right ways of doing it, all your feedback. And again, this is still about an 8 or 9 minute short sim that that's going to take you about 20 hours to make. So this is sort of what it looks like here. But here's some examples of head fakes. So here's again a sim I'd make a hostile robbery. And it's going to take you through a bunch of robberies. Okay. So and in the way that's going to do the sim is going to show you 4 different sims on 4 different robbery types. Okay, so hostile robbery sim.
Clark, so sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to say that we have about 2 minutes till the end of the session, so we might want to maybe make a decision on the priority.
Great. I'll just finish up this example and then so let's start with playing the role of a credit card specialist. It's Monday morning. You've got a busy week. You decide to head to work early to get stuff done. What do you have for breakfast? I'm gonna have coffee. Okay, coffee. Yeah. You get to work. You get in the car. You drive to the credit union. What do? Do you park closest to the door, further from the door, drive around the parking lot? No one picks drive around the parking lot, but that's actually the right thing to do because that's where that's kind of robbery. So the last thing in the sim design process is cut unnecessary words. So go through your sim and just cut like crazy because nothing bogs down a sim like words. So words are your enemy. Cut like crazy. So that's the basic approach to creating short sim. It doesn't take that long. It takes some thought. But using Talkmaster and I use PowerPoint as my graphic engine, you can do incredible stuff. So please go to www.shortsims.com. I have a full workshop if you want to help building your first one. But again, Talkmaster is a great tool. It's very easy to use, and I think the other important thing to do is if you're interested is to see a bunch of short sims yourself.
And play, of course.
Play, yes. You don't just see them. If you sit and stare at them for too long, it just drives everyone crazy. So play
Exactly.
through them.
We don't want that. No.
We don't
All
like
right.
crazy.
No. Clark, thank you so much. Do you have any final slide you want to show to us, or that's it? That's where we're good to go.
Good. You guys are good. You guys are smart. You get
Yeah.
the stuff. Go forth and make sims.
Sure. We've got a lot of comments in the chat about your presentation and the words of gratitude. So thank you so much, Clark. I could only join those words of gratitude and appreciation. I remember you from the last year, so it's incredibly helpful and very, very practical. So I would love to see you at our next iSpring Days or maybe at any other conference.
You're far too kind. It's always a pleasure to be here. And again, I'm such a huge fan of iSpring's tool. So I use almost all the modules regularly, but obviously Talkmaster the most. So thank you.